Welcome to the Spiritual Dance Podcast, a virtual space for creative souls discovering how to move in sync with the rhythm of spirit. I'm your host, Carla White Crowe, also known as the Dancing Oracle. In this podcast, I share openly about my journey of weaving together my two primary passions, spirituality and dance. My intention is to encourage and inspire spiritual seekers in pursuit of a more embodied form of spirituality, as well as provide insight and tools for those seeking to expand their creative edges in service to the world of spirit. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Spiritual Dance Podcast. I'm super excited to start diving into some educational topics pertaining to the world of spiritual dance. This episode, which is episode 4, is going to feel like a thorough vocabulary lesson. If you've listened to any of my previous episodes, then you know that I spent more than 20 years performing, choreographing, and teaching about spiritual dance exclusively through the lens of Christianity. In 2019, I went through a deep period of transformation in pursuit of a spiritual path that felt more expansive and inclusive. Over the course of the next 2 years, I spent a significant amount of time evaluating and updating my vocabulary for the various spiritual dance concepts and practices that I teach. I also completely rewrote my spiritual dance curriculum in order to reflect and honor my evolving beliefs. Today, I'm going to share with you all of the words, concepts, and practices that are an integral part of what I teach as a spiritual dance guide. I hope this information will help you understand the work I do in this world and the ways in which I serve the world of spirit with my craft. So let's begin by breaking down a phrase I use often when describing my work, which is spiritual dance and movement practices. And because this podcast is called the Spiritual Dance Podcast, I'm going to start with the first 2 words of that phrase, spiritual dance. To me, spiritual dance is an umbrella term that covers a vast landscape of other topics. I also like to think of that phrase as the container that holds everything I believe, teach, and practice. I define spiritual dance as the act of dancing in a manner that connects us to the unseen world and helps us engage with the divine. The amount of words I've heard to describe this concept reaches far and wide. Words like sacred dance, conscious dance, liturgical dance, praise dance, worship dance, prophetic dance, prayer dance, embodied prayer, warfare dance, ritual dance, trance dance, ecstatic dance, channeled movement, intuitive movement, dance ministry, dance meditation, healing dance, shamanic dance, psychic dance, dance mediumship, dance Reiki, dance divination, and I won't even begin to go into all of the different cultural dance forms that are spiritual in nature. For some, this concept isn't so much about connecting to the divine outside of themselves, but rather connecting to the divine within. This could include practices of engaging with the higher self, or tuning into the voice of your physical body, or connecting to and aligning your chakras, the energy centers of the body. I think that spiritual dance offers a unique way of harmonizing both our physical and energy bodies with the world of spirit. It allows us to experience the tangible and intangible worlds simultaneously. One of the most common questions I get asked is why I differentiate between the words dance and movement. I realize many, if not most people, use those words interchangeably. But to me, and also for the purposes of what I teach, dance and movement are vastly different concepts. This isn't something I was taught, and I can't say I've ever heard anyone else speak about this. But in my own lived experience, both personally and professionally, those words convey contrasting energies that serve opposite but equally important purposes. In my role as a spiritual dance guide, I start by helping people understand the differences between dance and movement, because everything I teach builds upon those two key concepts. If you look at these words in the dictionary, dance is described as a sequence of steps done in rhythm, often with music. Movement is described as changing your physical position or having your position changed. That last phrase is key to understanding what I believe to be different about movement versus dance. Movement is action that is created in the body by being in a receptive state. It's a type of motion that is involuntary, unintentional, reactive, and often inwardly directed. When I use the word movement, I'm referring to being aware of the energy that is at work around you, whether that is seen or unseen, subtle or obvious, and then moving or being moved in response to it. Dance is movement that one initiates and executes in the body with conscious intention. It is creative, goal-oriented, voluntary, and often outwardly directed. It is typically accompanied by a desire to share creative energy or a carefully crafted piece of work with an audience in order to entertain, tell a story, convey an idea, or elicit an emotional response. And side note, when I use the word audience, I'm referring to whatever the dancer perceives as an important external focus. It doesn't need to be a room full of humans. A performance can be done for nature, for deity, or for yourself. Here's an example I often use in my classes to describe the difference. Imagine being waist deep in the ocean, surrounded by energy that is already flowing in certain directions. Unless you intentionally resist it, your body moves automatically in response to the currents and tides that are happening around you. The same could be said about the spiritual realm. If you put yourself in a place to be open and receptive to the spiritual energies that are already moving and flowing around you, you can allow your body to respond with shapes and motion. In this scenario, you are allowing yourself to be moved by an outside force. Energy flows towards your physical body, and then your body responds in a kinetic manner, if you allow it to. Now put your mind back in that same place, waist deep in the ocean, and imagine that the current picks up a little bit, and it's starting to pull you farther and farther away from shore. You might decide that you need to take intentional action to swim against the current so that you can get back to safety. So you begin to move in rhythm by swimming to propel yourself to where you want to be. You are initiating and executing sustained movement in your body and directing that energy towards your desired outcome, which is to get yourself safely back to shore. So to summarize, with movement, you are sensing or experiencing unseen energy and allowing it to have a kinetic effect on your physical body. Whereas with dance, you are the one creating and directing the energy in order to have an impact on someone or something outside of yourself. In my experience, movement is often a very personal, intimate, and vulnerable practice. It takes faith, trust, and the ability to surrender, either to yourself or something greater than yourself, in order to experience the wide range of benefits that this kind of practice can offer you. On the flip side, dance has the potential to be a powerful solo practice. It can be done simply with the intention of raising energy so that we can then direct it towards a desired outcome. This is often seen in dance rituals or manifestation practices. Dance can also be utilized as a way of offering gratitude towards any meaningful spiritual energies or to honor a deity, lineage, or land. One of my primary spiritual practices is that of dancing for and with the elements. I direct my creative energy towards them as a way of giving back, honoring, and communing with them. I can also align with and embody their unique attributes in order to change my mental and emotional states and or achieve my goals. If you want to know more about that, I will go into great depth about those concepts when I get to the episode about elemental dance magic. The most important thing to remember here is that regardless of the way energy is flowing, one modality is not better than the other. Dance and movement serve different purposes, but they also work hand in hand when it comes to the work I do and the practices I teach. When you can learn to use them both together, that's when you create a beautiful cyclical practice that has the power to heal and transform both yourself and those in your sphere of influence. So let's imagine for a minute that the concept of spiritual dance is like a giant umbrella. And then imagine that there are two umbrellas underneath of it, giving us two subcategories, one called dance and the other called movement. For the remainder of this episode, I'm going to talk about the different practices I work with that fall under these two categories. Also, keep in mind that I will be dedicating whole episodes to many of these topics. This episode is simply meant to give you an overview of all these things. So next, I'm going to give you a breakdown of all the various spiritual movement practices that I teach. For context, in my own spiritual path, I believe in both the divine within, which I call our higher self, and the divine without. When referring to the divine without, I often just use the word spirit because that is a term that feels inclusive to most spiritual paths. But I also encourage my students to connect with whatever spiritual energy or deity feels most meaningful to them. Additionally, I believe that our physical bodies carry wisdom that we can connect to for guidance and healing. So as I go through and explain these different movement practices, please keep in mind that they are receptive in nature, whereby we can allow ourselves to receive and respond to energy that is already happening in and around us. Also, when we start using words like intuitive, psychic, channeling, mediumship, I know there's a lot of crossover as well as a lot of conflicting information out there. I'm going to explain those things based on the way that I've personally experienced and worked with them over the last 2 decades. I have also created some specific distinctions based on how they function within movement practices. So let's start with intuitive movement. Intuitive movement is a practice that helps us to be fully aware and fully present in our physical bodies, bypassing the ways in which we were trained or how we think we should move. When I teach intuitive movement, I'm guiding students through a process of learning to identify and respond to the voice of the divine within, as well as to our own inner wisdom. When we allow our bodies and our soul to guide us into the movement that he, she, they needs the most, we are activating our spiritual channel and fine-tuning our inner guidance system, which also paves the way for increased psychic development. Intuitive movement can also function as a type of healing modality that supports our mental and emotional well-being by helping us feel our emotions and then express them as we see fit. Next is interpretive movement. This is an expressive practice of retranslating our own personal experiences with this world. When we encounter people, places, concepts, events, or other forms of art that have a significant impact on us, we can reshare that experience from our own perspective. There's an emphasis on allowing the emotions you experience from interacting with something or someone to create a raw and authentic kinetic response in your body. When this type of movement is choreographed, rehearsed, and or performed, then it would fall into the category of interpretive dance. But I'm referring to a movement practice that happens in real time, a processing of emotions through an embodied response that happens in the moment. The biggest difference between intuitive and interpretive movement is that intuitive movement is a response to energy inside of you, whereas interpretive movement is a response to energy outside of you. Next, we have psychic movement. This is the practice of responding to energy gained through extrasensory perception. I have an extensive collection of activation exercises that I use to help students identify movement messages received through sight, clairvoyance, sound, clairaudience, feeling, clairempathy, and knowing, claircognizance. The difference between interpretive movement and psychic movement is that with interpretive movement, you are responding to something of interest that you've encountered outside of yourself, whereas psychic movement is a more specific response to an energetic message that you've received. For example, in a thunderstorm, you can feel and express the power you're encountering, but you may also feel a pull to take cover for safety. Or maybe you're connecting with a person who is incredibly charismatic. Being around them can make you feel good, but you may also experience some body postures that act as red flags, urging you not to get too close. I dive into this practice in great detail in my upcoming course and book on the practice of dance divination. Next, we have dance mediumship, which is the practice of receiving messages from spirits of deceased loved ones, spirit guides, and or other non-physical entities. These messages are expressed through movement and interpreted through a process called dance divination, which I will explain later in this episode. Mediumship relies heavily on well-developed intuitive skills and psychic abilities, and as such, I recommend spending an extended amount of time working with intuitive and psychic movement practices before moving into this arena. I'm also of the opinion that mediumship is a unique gift that comes with a responsibility to follow a strict code of ethics, especially when it comes to connecting with departed souls. I have not practiced dance mediumship in this way, at least not intentionally. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard of anyone who does this, but I do believe in it. I just personally don't feel called to that particular practice at this point in my life. However, I do practice dance mediumship in other ways, in nature with trees, the elements, and also with people in one-on-one healing containers or shamanic dance ritual. Lastly, we have channeled movement. Channeled movement is the practice of receiving and expressing supernatural knowledge or insight kinetically in the physical body. It allows you to see and experience messages from the world of spirit in a way that surpasses language barriers. Channeled movement is my primary spiritual practice. It's something I experience daily. It's also my most favorite thing to teach. This practice functions similarly to dance mediumship because mediums are channeling, but their point of connection is often different. In my work, I teach channeled movement from the perspective of connecting to higher level beings for higher level information. When I step into this role, I'm mostly connecting directly to source, pulling through big picture messages for spiritual guidance, growth, and development. Just like dance mediumship, channeled movement also relies on the practice of dance divination for interpretation. And so I almost always teach those two things simultaneously. So let's go back to my ocean example to help us understand how each of these movement practices could be applied to the same outside stimuli. Imagine that you're standing on the shore, taking in the beauty of the sky, the water, the birds, the sand, the sounds, etc. You begin to notice your body soften and move into a receptive stance, maybe opening your hands or lifting your arms out of a desire to take in the energy swirling around you. You could also find yourself swaying or giving into the nurturing energy of the sights and sounds happening around you. This is a subtle form of intuitive movement. Then maybe you begin to notice your body rising and falling like the ocean waves, or pulling you forward or pushing you back in the same way the tides move the water into and away from the shore. This is a form of interpretive movement. Then maybe your body starts to retreat, taking a few steps backward to put more distance between yourself and the water. Next thing you know, a giant wave crashes right where you were standing. You may have experienced clairsentience or claircognizance in the form of movement in order to keep you out of harm's way. This is a form of psychic movement. Then maybe your body begins to move in a unique way, creating shapes that lead you into sequences that seem to communicate something deeper. In this instance, I would suggest that something in your environment, most likely the water, is sending you a message and your body is picking up on that energy and responding with movement. This could be a form of dance mediumship. And finally, you find yourself moved by all the incredible sensory experiences available to you in that moment. So perhaps you feel a nudge to open up and connect with something greater than yourself. You ask Spirit for wisdom and insight on how you can be of service to the land you are standing on. Movement begins to flow, and you take note of the shapes, the styles, levels, direction of movement, and any repetitive sequences that come through. This is what I would categorize as channeled movement, because our intention and our point of connection is greater than just what we are experiencing in the environment. Lastly, I would pause to write down anything and everything that came through and interpret those things using my dance divination techniques. You could then craft a sacred dance practice in order to honor the land or offer gratitude to Spirit for your time in that beautiful place. And that brings us to our second umbrella under spiritual dance, which is dance practices. I'm going to further break down the umbrella of dance practices into two more categories, which I call sacred dance and healing dance. So let's start with sacred dance practices. The Sacred Dance Guild defines this as any type of dance that is done with an intention to connect with or communicate something about the sacred. So right away, we see the use of the word intention, meaning there's a goal of moving energy outward to engage with something outside of ourselves. My experience with sacred dance has either been in cultural dance practices or in spaces affiliated with a religious path, worshiping a particular deity. Please hear me when I say that's not a hard and fast rule. We all have different values and beliefs about what is sacred, but this is the reason that I make a distinction between spiritual dance and sacred dance. There is a whole world of spiritual dance that exists outside of religion, deity, rituals, and cultural traditions. Here are some of the modalities that I would place under the umbrella of sacred dance. The first one being liturgical dance. Liturgical dance is dance that is part of the liturgy in a religious service or ceremony. It expresses and invites others into spiritual communion with the divine within a public worship setting. In my experience, this type of sacred dance often involves some level of pageantry, such as flags, scarves, ribbons, or banners. Next is worship dance. Worship dance is an expressive type of dance inspired by devotion to a divine being or supernatural power. It is a heartfelt act of reverence, which can stir up emotions in both the dancer and any onlookers. Worship dance is created, whether choreographed or spontaneous, as a response to the love we experience in our spiritual connections. In this practice, dancers move from a place of adoration, often with a goal of honoring a particular deity with their dance. Next is praise dance, which is a dance of gratitude and celebration, and could be similar in nature to worship dance. In fact, these terms are often used interchangeably. I think the musical selection and tempo displayed could help draw a distinction, though, because in my experience, praise dance is more vibrant and upbeat, with bigger and stronger movements such as clapping, jumping, and skipping. Some of the praise dance I've witnessed has also included the use of tambourines. Some religious communities believe that the purpose of praise dance is to bring about the manifested presence of God. Next, we have dance ritual. This is a well thought out act or a pre-planned ceremony created for a specific purpose and includes a significant amount of dance in the activities. There are a lot of reasons people perform rituals, and the practice itself can fall anywhere on the spectrum of simple to complex and elaborate. It just depends on the desired outcome. Most of my dance rituals are done as a way of connecting with lunar cycles or cultivating relationships with nature or the elements, or honoring the change of season. I also create dance rituals for others, both individuals and groups, in order to help them connect more deeply with spirit and learn to embody various spiritual principles. Next is prayer dance. Prayer dance is an expression of our relationship with the divine. Some refer to it as embodied prayer. It is outwardly directed kinetic energy performed with the intention of communicating our desires, needs, or affection for that which we hold sacred. This is a practice that allows us to express gratitude and adoration for our spiritual connections, send positive healing energy towards someone or something, or to manifest something we need or want. It's an incredibly nourishing practice, both on a personal and collective level. So often I find that words limit the scope of what I want to express to the divine, but my body in motion can communicate clearly when words aren't enough. If you've ever watched someone dance their prayers, I'm sure you would agree what a powerful and inspiring thing it is. Next, we have dance meditation. This is a means of calming the mind and connecting to conscious awareness so that we can achieve whatever intention we set for ourselves. Many people think of meditation as being done in stillness, often in a seated or lying down position. But I think some people, like myself, can achieve a meditative state easier through movement. For me, this looks like moving through repetitive shapes and sequences at a slow tempo and actively engaging with my breath every step of the way. That brings us to conscious dance. Conscious dance is a practice that honors the sacredness of body, breath, and presence. This process encourages dancers to move mindfully, bringing awareness to all the creative possibilities available to us in the human form. It is a freestyle form of dance where the only guideline is to express yourself in the most authentic way possible. And lastly, we have ecstatic dance. This is a term often used interchangeably with conscious dance. But the biggest difference is that conscious dance usually has a guide that is with you for the entirety of your session, whereas ecstatic dance has much less direction other than an opening and closing ceremony or ritual. Ecstatic dance could be viewed as an energetic container, somewhere you can explore your body freely without any boundaries. So now we're going to move into the category of healing dance. Dance can be a powerful tool for healing, either for the dancer themselves or when working with others in a coaching or clinical arrangement. Groups can also benefit from this practice when there is a need for collective healing. One type of dance that I love that has been very healing for me personally is journey dance. This is a practice I started learning online during the pandemic lockdown. It is a form of conscious dance with a focused goal of mental and emotional well-being. Dancers are guided through a literal journey that helps them to identify and express stuck emotions or negative thought patterns and release them. Journey dance is incredible for personal healing, even though it's often done in a group class setting. This practice will always have a special place in my heart because it helped me navigate some of the hardest years of my life. I even went on to complete all 3 levels of certification in order to become a journey dance facilitator. Next, we have prophetic dance. This is the practice of sharing divinely inspired messages kinetically in the physical body. You might notice that my definition for prophetic dance is almost identical to channeled movement. The only difference is the direction of the flow of energy. When we channel, we are pulling energy into our field of awareness. When we prophesy, we are sending that energy out towards someone or something. I often do both of these things simultaneously, especially in a reading or a healing session. In fact, I believe that prophetic dance requires some level of channeling. As a choreographer, a lot of my works begin from themes and sequences I channel in my dreams. Then I wake up and rush to learn it before it's gone. When those pieces make it to the stage, I feel they are absolutely a form of prophetic dance because they are movement messages delivered to my audience from the supernatural realm. In my experience, prophetic dance is a powerful tool for group, collective, and/or environmental healing, though it can also be done in a one-on-one setting. I also want to add that I have experienced prophetic dance come through for many different purposes, such as when there's a need for protection, encouragement, edification, or instruction surrounding things to come. Next is intercessory dance. This is a type of prayer dance done on behalf of another person, place, or thing. An intercessor sends their energy outwards, usually towards a deity or divine being, asking them to intervene in a particular situation. The dancer acts as a bridge between the natural and supernatural worlds, providing or adding to the movement prayers for someone or something outside of themselves. Next, we have dance Reiki. Reiki is the practice of using spiritually guided life force energy to address energetic imbalances. The basic idea is to create harmony in the body by channeling energy through the hands in order to energize or clear away any unwanted energy. Full transparency, I have personally never received Reiki training, though it is on my list of things I hope to do one day. But I do have many friends that are Reiki masters, and when they describe their Reiki practice to me, it sounds so similar to a particular type of ministry I was trained in back in my church days called the laying on of hands. When I work with clients one-on-one, I use dance to shift the energy in and around them by removing or applying energy with whole body movements. I spent many years infusing my healing dance sessions with that practice and saw incredible results. So it is my opinion that dance done with our whole body versus just our hands can amplify the basic principles of Reiki, thus making it a powerful tool for shifting or balancing energy in groups, communities, or other environments, as well as in a coaching or healing session. Next, we have dance ministry. This is a type of spiritual service that uses dance as a means of offering guidance, counsel, or healing. In my experience, the exact process used is often created on the spot, pulling from several different spiritual dance and movement practices that are best suited for the desired outcome. I spent well over a decade teaching and offering dance ministry through my church and in my dance companies. Again, it's hard to give you an exact formula, but I would typically begin with psychic dance and or dance mediumship to better understand the energies surrounding the person I was ministering to, someone who these days I would refer to as my sitter. Then I'd move into channeled movement, connecting to source in order to gain insight and guidance for them. I usually finish the session with prayer dance, prophetic dance, and or dance Reiki, depending on what is needed, followed by a debrief using my dance divination techniques to help alchemize everything that took place during a session. This is an extensive and incredibly nuanced process that carries a great deal of responsibility. Because of that, I feel that an extensive level of study and time invested in an apprenticeship type program should be undertaken before stepping into this role. Next is shamanic dance. This is a restorative practice of helping people remember who they are through embodied dance rituals. A shaman is an intuitive healer. The word shaman literally means one who knows. Shamanic dance can be practiced one-on-one in a healing container or as a group for collective healing. Either way, this process begins by connecting with the spirit realm through a dance meditation that helps you move into a trance-like state so you can move between worlds and redirect spiritual energy back into the physical realm, usually for the purpose of healing. Much like dance ministry, shamanic dance is a practice that involves a lot of different modalities. Shamans initiate a dialogue with source on behalf of another, similar to intercessory dance. Typically, a shaman sets an intention, dances as a form of meditation to achieve an altered state, and then channels movement that communicates messages of healing and inspiration. Lastly, we have warfare dance, or the dance of protection. I personally don't use the term warfare dance anymore because it evokes memories of a particular theology that I was taught, which is, in my opinion, rooted in fear. Again, you can go back and listen to episode 3 if you want to know more about that. However, I absolutely believe in personal protection practices and defensive magic, and I often use dance to support and enhance both of those things. This practice could also be viewed as a method of reclaiming. As you can imagine, this type of dance involves drawing and strengthening boundaries around yourself, your space, and/or something that's important to you. It is outwardly directed energy done with the intention of preventing or reversing harm or ill will towards someone or something. Protective dance looks assertive or even aggressive and can include sharp movements, angular shapes, and pushing or pulling motions. Before we wrap up this episode, there are a few other practices that I want to touch on that I feel are important to mention. The first one being dance divination. This is something I have been developing and practicing for almost 2 decades. I define dance divination as the unique spiritual practice of interpreting supernatural messages, information, or insight while observing or engaging in channeled movement or divinely inspired dance. It offers us another layer of understanding and discernment to use as we see, feel, and experience communication from the spiritual plane from an entirely different perspective, one that isn't limited by words. You don't need to be a dancer to engage in this practice. In fact, you don't even need to move your body. Dance divination is an observational practice that allows you to draw conclusions about spiritual things by combining the principles of dance composition, energetics, and other esoteric systems such as tarot and astrology. Again, I will have a whole episode dedicated to this, as well as a book and an online course for you to learn all about this process. So make sure you're on my mailing list if you want to learn more. Next, we have cosmic choreography. This is a practice I've developed that combines dance and astrology principles to help people expand their awareness of themselves, their body, and the cosmic forces at work around them. Sometimes I refer to this practice as embodied astrology because the point is to learn how astrology is expressed through our physical body. It is incredibly helpful in supporting manifestation practices as well as healing work. It could also be utilized as a form of dance meditation. Lastly, we have flow arts. Flow arts is a rapidly growing community of humans who combine dance and other forms of movement with skill-based techniques involving a wide variety of props. Flow artists practice their creative disciplines with the goal of achieving a flow state that cultivates present moment awareness. More and more, I'm seeing this concept emerge in conscious and ecstatic dance communities, and I'm thrilled to see the growing interest in this art form. In episode 2, I talked about how much I loved Winter Guard and Color Guard in high school. I shared how dancing with props such as flags, ribbons, scarves, and banners felt like an extension of my energy, and that I continue to use these props and many others to this day. I find that they help me to focus my energy and can add another powerful dimension to my art through the use of color, the elements, and other tangible natural materials. I often work with scarves or flags in my own private dance meditation practice because of the way it helps pull me into a trance-like state. So that wraps up this episode. I hope that this information helps give you a better understanding of what spiritual dance is. For those of you who are visual learners, I have a free PDF guidebook you can download that will give you the Cliff Notes version of everything I talked about today. This can be really helpful for digesting all of this information. You can access it by sharing your email with me through the link in the show notes or through any of my social media bios. If you're already on my mailing list, simply DM me and I will send you a copy. And that, my friends, is everything I have for you today. I will catch you all next time. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would greatly appreciate a positive rating and review. This helps others find me so that I can support and inspire as many humans as possible. If you would like to learn more about my work, please visit www.thedancingOracle.com. There you can book an intuitive reading or embodied coaching session and find out about my upcoming events. You can also sign up for my mailing list to be notified of my upcoming course and book launches on the topic of dance divination. Until next time, be well, friends, and I will see you in the next episode.